Hi, this is Brian with ActiveMelody.com. Well, around this time of year, every year, I like to put out a Christmas song. And so this year I thought I would do Oh Holy Night. It's a great melody that we all know, and it's very slow, so it's fairly easy to play along with, but it's also very dramatic. It has this big build-up in the end, and I thought that would be a really cool thing to do on electric guitar. It gives you some room to improvise. I've thrown in some bluesy licks in there to kind of spice things up. And so I'm going to break down at least my version of it, note for note, and explain where all those notes come from. So you're not just memorizing the notes, you're understanding how those notes connect back to scales and chord shapes that you already know, so that you can start to improvise in this style. That's really the goal in this and all these lessons. I've also got several other Christmas lessons. You can check those out on the lessons page. There's a Christmas lessons category. So I've done this for several years now. So I've got this lesson split into two parts. In this video we'll take a look at the first half. If you'd like to download the second half and get the tablature and get the MP3 jam track that you can play along with, you can get all of those things by going to ActiveMelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page and do a search for EP285. Alright, so Oh Holy Night. Now this song is in 6/8 time, so when we're counting this, you'd count it like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And a lot of the old Christmas music, like Away in a Manger and Silent Night, they're in 3/4 time like this, or 6/8 time. They're not in that standard 4/4 time that we're probably most comfortable with. And another thing I'll mention about Christmas music is it's very deceptive. It's more difficult always than it appears. I think that's because we know these melodies, so we just assume they sound simple. But when you get into them, there's usually some chord changes that are thrown in, and it can always kind of throw you for a loop. So don't feel discouraged if you think, God, I can't even play Christmas music, because honestly, that's some of the more difficult music you can play. So with this song, the way that I arranged it was it started on the 5 chord. So we're playing this in the key of E, and I'm starting on a B chord, or the jam track starts on a B chord, and I ended up playing a little simple, like a Steve Cropper sounding harmonized 6 lick that I threw in there. I was going to do something more meaningful, but I did that on one of the first passes through, and I thought, I'll just keep it. It's simple. And so let me show you what I'm doing there. So if I'm just thinking about the B chord shape, that's where we bar here on the 7th fret, and then these 3 fingers make up the E chord. This is out of the cage system. But if I look at the 1st and 3rd string out of that chord, it looks like that. And just remember that going forward. If you want to play a harmonized 6 out of a chord, you can just grab those out of that bar chord. You can kind of visualize the bar chord, and you know how to play that. So I slid into that 3rd string, and then I slid them both down 2 frets. And this is a small little takeaway here that you can remember. As I slide from this note down to this note, that's the 7th note, or the 7th out of the, if you're playing like a dominant 7, to give it that bluesy sound. So you can always, if you're playing this harmonized 6, you can always slide it down 2 frets, to get that 7th sound, or more of a bluesy feel. And that's what I ended up starting with. Okay, so then we go right into the E chord, and I played. And what I'm starting with is some harmonized notes. These are harmonized thirds. They're 3 intervals apart, these notes. And then I go into some single string stuff. So I'm kind of mixing up the harmonized notes with single string. But I'm sliding into the 2nd and 3rd string on the 9th fret. And those are just downstrokes. Now, to help you visualize what's going on here, I'm thinking about, so we're playing in the key of E, remember? And this is our 1 chord. So I'm thinking about the E chord, which is right here. I'm also thinking about the E chord, which is up here. That's where you would do a full bar here on the 12th fret. It's the same as this. It's just an octave higher, right? So I was thinking about, so I can see these 2 chords here, and I know these notes are going to work, any of the notes in those chords. So when I'm starting that's right out of that chord shape. And then I come up to this position, and I'm playing the 12th fret 2nd string and the 13th fret 3rd string. And those 2 notes are in this chord shape. So you got, right? And so that should make sense as to why those notes work. The other way you can think about it is to think about the major pentatonic scale, which is right there for E. So you can see those notes in that scale as well. So whichever way is easier for you to think about, whether that be seeing them inside the chord shapes or in the scale, that's why it works. Then we come up to this. Now this is where I've got my index finger on the 9th fret, 1st string, my middle finger's on the 10th fret, 2nd string, and those two notes, this is where the song goes to the A chord. So if we were playing the chords, you got the E, and then we go to the A chord. So I'm thinking about A chord here, I've got an A chord up here, that's using the D chord shape out of caged. Now if I look at this and I play just the top 2 strings out of that chord, that's where that harmonized third came from. And I'm trying to keep it all in the same general area here. And then you play 2nd string, 1st string, and then I came up here and played these 2 notes. Now this is out of that same E chord shape. So this is where the song goes back to the E, and I'm just thinking of the top 2 notes out of the bar chord, and then strings 2 and 3 out of that bar chord. So that should make that pretty easy to at least visualize where those notes are coming from, so that you can start to do this stuff when you want to create your own melodies. You see that it's not that hard. Just find your chord shapes and then start pulling the notes out of those chord shapes. There's only a handful of them. It's not like there's endless options. So from the beginning, we have now I'm going to come down and go. So now I'm walking, now I'm thinking about that major pentatonic scale that I mentioned. So I'm going from here down into the major pentatonic scale. That's where I went in my mind anyway. So I'm just barring strings 1, 2, and 3 here on the 9th fret, playing strings 2 and 3. And then I came down and played strings 3 and 4 on the 11th fret, and then 3 and 4 on the 9th fret. So, and those notes are all in that major pentatonic scale. Pattern 1. That's how I'm seeing them. So we have right? Sounds kind of cool. And you could do this obviously in any key. So if you're ever playing this and it's your time to solo or improvise in this song, you now know how I'm connecting them to chord shapes. So you should be able to fairly easily transpose this in your mind to any key. Now the next phrase goes, and actually I did a vibrato on that. And again, this is in that major pentatonic scale. Actually, we're going into the major scale as I introduce this note. Remember, the major scale has 2 extra notes, extra from if you're used to the pentatonic scale. Penta is 5. The major scale has 7. So that's one of the extra notes. So we're starting there on the 9th fret, 2nd string, going up to the 10th fret, and then doing a full bend. Back to the 10th fret, 2nd string, and then a hammer-on between the 9th fret and the 9th fret and the 11th fret on the 3rd string, and then the 9th fret, 3rd string. Now the hardest thing at this point for some of you is going to be playing that vibrato at the top of this bend. I can't tell you how many hours I spent trying to figure out how to do that, and I don't really have an easy way to explain it other than you just have to keep practicing it. It's one of those things that eventually it just clicks and your wrist knows what to do. But if you can't do that, you can always use a tremolo, whammy bar, or you could slide. You have other options if you don't want to do the bend. I just think it sounds cool. And a lot of this lesson is about control. It's not that complicated, but it's trying to play this accurately, not bumping other strings. And you know, it's such a recognizable melody. Everyone that hears it is going to kind of know what's coming next. So you have to be on your game. And then I went and came down and kind of echoed that an octave lower. So all I did here was think about this E chord down in first position, and I played a few notes out of that chord. So I'm playing the 1st fret 3rd string, do a hammer on to the 2nd fret, and a pull off. And then I did another hammer on to the 2nd fret, 4th string. So, alright, so that's the first time through. Let's back up from the beginning and play us up to that point. We'll start with that 5 chord. Nice, right? Now we're going to play it again. Now this is where the melody repeats itself. And so I wanted to do something a little different. So if you're trying to arrange music, you can always repeat exactly what you just did. But if you listen to the really good arrangers, they always would mix it up. I've always been fascinated with Chet Atkins and how he would put together songs, and he'll go from one octave to another and play different chord voicings and things. So the second time through I went... Now this sounds more complicated than it is. It's actually very simple to do because I'm just playing the same shape actually on the 3rd and the 1st string. So I'm starting here on the 4th fret and I'm sliding up to the 3rd string and my ring finger is on the 1st string, same fret. So I'm picking this on the 3rd string and then I'm plucking on the 1st string. I'm hybrid picking this part. And if you were wondering what these notes are, why do they work? Well, we came to the E chord, right? We're back to the 1 chord. So I'm thinking about the different positions of the E chord. Well, I've got one here. I've got one here using that D chord shape. And if you don't know what I mean by these different chord voicings, check out the lesson that I did, the lessons that I've done on Caged, C-A-G-E-D. You can do a search for that on the Active Melody Lessons page. And there's a couple lessons on it. But this is using that D chord shape, so I'm just playing strings 3 and 1 out of that shape. And then I'm going to slide up here to the 7th fret, the same strings, 3 and 1, but now we're playing on the 7th fret. And you can see that it's got kind of a bluesy sound, and that's because this note, which is your 7, if you're playing an E7 chord. And so that's the reason for that. And that's another takeaway. You can remember, if you're playing, out of this D chord shape, strings 1 and 3, if you want the bluesy version of that, like as a transition chord to go to the next one, you can slide it from here up. You'd go up 3 frets, and it's going to work. Okay, so we have, and then I went and walked it up again. So this is going from the 7th fret up to the 8th fret and up to the 9th fret. And why these 2 strings is because now we're playing over the A chord. There's that same D chord shape, strings 1 and 3, just like we did over the E chord, but we walked it up to the A. And then notice I put my pinky down there, and look at what I'm making. If you look at these 3 fingers, you can see I'm just making that D chord shape. Now that's not the D chord, that's the A chord, but I'm using the D chord shape, like the D chord we learned in first position, and that again is covered in Cage. So that's 2 and 1 string numbers, and then all the way up here to the 12th fret 1st string, and then the 12th fret 2nd string. Okay, let's back it up from the 2nd time through. So we have, and this is where the song throws you a curveball. You think, yeah, I've got this. It's a 1-4-5 chord progression, simple. And then you realize, oh no, wait, there's this minor chord, which is a G sharp minor chord. And then there's a D sharp 7 chord, and then back to the G sharp minor. So now we got to play something over that. And so in the lead part, what I ended up playing was that. Now that's just the melody, but it just happens to work out that it's all in the same area. And again, I'm still kind of got my head in that E major pentatonic scale. Even though the song switches here, and we're now playing a minor chord, I can play in that same general area. I'm not playing the same exact notes, but it's by changing the chord underneath it, it changes the context of these notes. So we left off there at the 12th fret, 2nd string, and then we come down to the 11th fret, 2nd string, and then the 9th fret, 2nd string. And then let that note ring out so that you can play the 11th fret, 1st string. Let me show you the notes and I'll show you how to think about it. Then from here I got, so that's 12th fret, 2nd string, 9th fret, 1st string, 11th fret, 1st string. Now we're going to do a half bend and a release. Now remember, we're not doing a full bend. A half bend is when you play one note higher than where you started. So we're trying to play that note. And then that last note there is the 9th fret, 2nd string. All right, so let me play that little phrase again. And remember, we're playing those notes over that G sharp minor, the D sharp 7, and the G sharp minor again. And if you look at the first notes, that would be, if we're thinking minor pentatonic scale, that would be pattern 3 of the minor pentatonic scale for G sharp. So G sharp would be here. Pattern 1, pattern 2, pattern 3. So that's why those notes work, because we're just kind of playing out of pattern 3 of the G minor pentatonic scale. Now, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't thinking about that as I was noodling around and coming up with this. I knew the melody, it was already in my head, and so I kind of knew, my fingers sort of knew where to go, and that will happen over time. The more you play, your fingers will just kind of know what the nearest neighbors are, what sound they're going to get, especially if it's played slowly like this. You have enough time to kind of think about it and anticipate it. So just keep that in mind. If you're trying to improvise and you're thinking, how do you do that? It comes over time, and I did make mistakes as I was coming up with it as well. I had to kind of noodle around until I figured it out. But that's why those notes work. Okay. Then after I played that, I came down here and echoed that one. Now all I did when I did this, I was just thinking about your G sharp minor chord. And I could visualize that chord, and I was thinking all these little licks that I could play off this chord shape. And I just played. That's a hammer-on between the 4th fret and the 6th fret on the 3rd string. Pull off, and then another hammer-on to the 6th fret, 4th string. Let that be a takeaway. If it's a minor chord, it's a great little lick. Even if you learn nothing else. There's your B minor, if you wanted to play it over a B minor. So use that in other things is what I'm saying. Don't just limit it to this song. Okay, let's back it up all the way from the beginning and play it up to that point. So from that B7 chord, from the 5 chord, we have... All right, now the song goes from that minor back into major, and it starts on the 5 chord, which would be your B7 chord, and then goes to the E chord. And what I ended up doing, I thought about, originally I was going to play the melody up here because we were already doing all this higher on the neck stuff, but I ended up coming down here and playing. Because I can use these chord shapes down here that are already familiar. So I'm starting with the open B string, or the 2nd string, and then I'm going to play the B7 chord along with it. So the 2nd string, and then the chord with that note, with that 2nd string. I'm going to assume you know how to make a B7 chord. It's in the tablature if you need it. Then my pinky goes down on the 2nd fret, 2nd string. Then I take my hand off and I come over here to the 4th fret, 4th string. And then I let my ring finger go down on the 4th fret, 3rd string. So I can play those 2 notes. So it goes like this. And then it goes to the 1 chord. It resolves back on the 1 chord. It goes. Now to go back to the 1 chord, you're just going to come down here and play an E chord. But you're going to add your pinky to the 2nd fret, 2nd string. And that gives you an E6 chord. It's a really nice sounding chord. Then take your pinky off and play the open 2nd string. Then the open 1 string, the 3rd string, and we're keeping that chord down. And then we're going to do a hammer-on back to the 2nd fret, 2nd string with our pinky. So all together, for that E chord, we have... And you can give it some vibrato while it's ringing out. Now you play the open B string again. It allows you to take your hand off to get in position, play this B7 again. And then we come back to the same shape that we just did. And then we go back to the E chord again. Alright, now this is where the song now goes into fall on your knees and that whole other, it gets a lot more dramatic. And I kind of worked in some blues stuff, but I'm going to save that for the second video. Because we've covered a lot of information. And some of this stuff will be a lot easier to follow along with if you are a premium member and you have the tablature. I've got the on-screen tab viewer, which has the music playing and you can play through it slowly and everything. You've also got the jam track, which is that's really the end goal, is to play this along with that jam track. But let's back up now from the beginning and play us up to that point, and then I'll see you in part 2 and we'll go through the rest of it. So we're going to start from that B7 chord.